Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to trace the origins of the British Empire, an empire that would, believe it or not, one day cover about a quarter of the entire globe. We're going to explore how this little island nation laid the groundwork for world domination, one step at a time.
I mean, just think about that for a second. At its absolute peak, this one empire controlled a fourth of the world's land and a fourth of its people. It was a global superpower on a scale that had never, ever been seen before, with a footprint on every single continent.
So, the big question is, how on earth did this happen? How did a relatively small island nation get the ball rolling on world domination? Well, to answer that, we've got to go way back to a time when England's own survival wasn't even a sure thing. The story starts not by looking out across the oceans, but by looking inward.
Right, so the story of the British Empire doesn't kick off with tall ships sailing for faraway lands. Nope, it starts right at home, with a very long, very messy project of conquering its closest neighbors.
And this was the crucial first step. See, by pulling together all these different Anglo-Saxon kingdoms into one single state, King Athelstan created a centralized power. That means one king, one army, one way of collecting taxes. Basically, the essential toolkit you need for any future expansion. This really set the stage for everything that followed.
And when you look at this timeline, you see this was a slow, often incredibly brutal process that took something like 600 years. Each of these steps wasn't just another conquest. It was like a rehearsal for building an empire. The tactics they tested here, setting up plantations in Ireland to push out the locals, or forcing English law in Wales, that became the playbook for colonization on a global scale.
Okay, so with the British Isles now more or less under one roof, this new kingdom of Great Britain started to look outward. The discovery of the Americas had kicked off this mad dash, and for Britain, the motivation was a potent cocktail of different things.
Now, what's so important to get here is that this early expansion wasn't some grand, centrally planned government project. Oh no, it was a messy, opportunistic free-for-all. You had state-sponsored pirates, basically privateers, looting Spanish gold. You had religious groups looking for a place to practice their faith freely, and you had private companies chasing the dream of getting unbelievably rich.
And this jumble of motives, it led to two totally different kinds of colonies. On one hand, you had settlements like Plymouth, founded by people who wanted religious freedom to build a new society. And on the other, you had exploitation colonies, like Barbados, that were designed for one thing and one thing only, to squeeze out as much profit as possible from cash crops. But both of them, eventually, would come to depend on the exact same horrific source of labor.
And that horrific labor source was, of course, the transatlantic slave trade. The mind-boggling profits from crops like sugar and tobacco, all harvested by enslaved people, became the economic engine of this early empire. And that wealth didn't just make planters rich, it funded the Royal Navy, it fueled Britain's own industrial revolution. It created this powerful feedback loop where the profits of slavery paid for the very tools of more expansion.
The sheer scale of this it's just hard to wrap your head around. In a single decade, just 10 years, British ships transported 200,000 human beings in the most brutal conditions imaginable. Britain didn't just take part in the slave trade, it eventually came to dominate it.
And to justify a system this brutal, you have to build an ideology, a vicious one. This quote from the actual colonial laws in South Carolina, it shows you exactly how they did it. They officially dehumanized enslaved people, stripped them of every right, and called them savage to rationalize keeping them in bondage. So as this brutal economic machine was getting started, England's growing wealth and confidence led to a massive showdown back home. The defeat of the Spanish Armada in 1588, it was a huge military victory, sure, but it was also a massive psychological one. It proved that this little island nation could go toe-to-toe with the world's reigning superpower on the open ocean and win. It really opened the floodgates for even bigger global ambitions.
Okay, so by the time we get to the 18th century, the rivalry between Britain and its main competitor, France, has blown up into a full-scale global conflict. This wasn't just about Europe anymore. This was a war for control of the entire world.
And this war, the 7 Years' War, is often called the First True World War. It was the ultimate showdown between Britain and France, fought across oceans and continents. The future of North America and the unbelievable wealth of India were all on the line.
And all across the globe, British forces, often led by the powerful, semi-private East India Company, just kept winning these stunning victories. They seized control of Bengal and India. Then, in a killer blow, They captured Quebec, completely shattering France's empire in North America.
The end result of all these wins was the Treaty of Paris in 1763, and it was a total and complete triumph for Britain. France was forced to give up Canada and all its land east of the Mississippi. Just like that, its North American empire was gone. Britain was now, without a doubt, the world's leading colonial and naval superpower.
But here's the twist. This massive victory created a whole new set of problems. The war was incredibly expensive, and it left Britain with a mountain of debt. And the way they tried to solve that debt problem? Well, it led directly to one of their biggest failures and a huge strategic pivot.
From London's perspective, the logic was simple. Hey, we fought this war to protect the American colonies, so it's only fair they help pay for it. But the colonists, well, they saw it very differently. Their argument was that a parliament thousands of miles away, where they didn't have a single elected representative, had absolutely no right to tax them.
Now, losing America was a devastating, humiliating blow. But did it end the empire? Not even close. Instead, it forced a complete rethink. The government clamped down and tightened its grip on its territories in India, which were now more valuable than ever. And then it found a replacement for its lost American lands by claiming an entire continent on the other side of the planet, Australia.
You can really see this was a dramatic strategic shift. The First Empire, which was all about settlement in the Atlantic, was basically over. And in its place, a second empire was rising, one that was way less about settlement and way more about economic exploitation in Asia and strategic control of the Pacific.
Yeah, this new empire was just different. It was less about sending settlers over to build new societies from scratch and much more about direct rule, pulling out resources and controlling global trade routes with the most powerful navy on the planet.
So by the year 1800, all the foundations were truly global. You had the economic engine of India, the strategic outpost of Australia, the horrific but profitable sugar islands in the Caribbean, and Canada as a safe haven for loyalists. And the whole thing was held together by that unstoppable navy.
And this all led to that famous phrase, which was actually written before America was lost. It just perfectly captured the incredible scale and ambition of what Britain was building. An empire where, quite literally, the sun never set.
But in the end, the question we have to ask is, at what cost? The foundations of this global empire weren't just built on ambition and victory. They were also built on conquest, on slavery, and on exploitation. And those are the powerful and often very painful legacies that are still shaping our world today.